Down to 5, Judy McLeod is rebuilding Conference USA, replenishing the ranks with Liberty, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston State, and New Mexico State. Liberty is located in Lynchburg, Virginia. It's the number 299 school in U.S. News. It has a 28,000 undergraduate full-time enrollment, a monster $1.7 billion endowment, a $47.8 million athletic budget that would lead Conference USA, and the closest top 200 airport is Roanoke, 53 miles away. Having been to over 50 college football stadiums, Liberty is one of my favorite college football road trips, being near Appomattox and Peaks of Otter if you're into history and geography. And the view of that hill at Williams Stadium is one of the most scenic views in college football. Liberty football started FBS play in 2018, the same time they completed a $40 million stadium renovation. By year 3, Liberty finished number 17 in the AP poll. Liberty's $15 million football budget would lead Conference USA, and they host an ACC school every year from 2025 through 2030. Liberty has one of the best student sections, in my view, in the country. In that picture, in the lower deck on the right side, that sea of red is their whole student section. Liberty basketball opened the brand new $65 million Liberty Arena in 2020. Their $3.5 million men's basketball budget would lead Conference USA. They had a 3,000 3-year rolling attendance average pre-COVID. Liberty has a 5-year KenPom of 126. They've been to 5 NCAA tournaments and had an NCAA tournament victory in 2019. New Mexico State is located about 45 miles from El Paso. New Mexico State is the number 227 school in U.S. News, number 169 in Shanghai. They're an R2 Carnegie Research Institution. New Mexico State has a $27.7 million athletic budget. Aggie football has a $9.2 million budget. New Mexico State had a 3-year rolling attendance average of 16,000 pre-COVID. They have the Battle of I-10 with UTEP, where they've had 98 meetings. And New Mexico State will be reuniting with UTEP in the same conference for the first time since the Border Conference over 60 years ago. New Mexico State went to and won a bowl game in 2017 for the first time since 1960, and it was reported that 26,000 Aggie fans traveled to the Arizona Bowl in Tucson. New Mexico State has a $3.3 million men's basketball budget that would be top 3 in Conference USA. Their rolling 3-year attendance average pre-COVID would be number 1 in Conference USA, and their 5-year KenPom of 88 would also lead Conference USA. New Mexico State has a very historic basketball program that's been to 25 NCAA tournaments, 8 since 2010. The Aggies have been to 5 Sweet 16s and the Final Four in 1970. Sam Houston State is located in Huntsville, Texas. They're the number 249 school in U.S. News. Sam Houston has a 15,000 undergraduate full-time enrollment, a $120 million endowment, a $17.6 million athletic budget, and it is located 60 miles from Houston. Their 5-year Sagarin ranking of 121 would rank 5th in Conference USA despite playing in FCS. Sam Houston has won over 75% of their games all time at Bauer Stadium. Sam Houston has qualified for 8 of the last 10 FCS playoffs. They're a 2-time FCS national runner-up and won the national championship in 2020. Sam Houston basketball has a $1.2 million men's basketball budget. They've been to 2 NCAA tournaments. They went to the NIT in 2019, and they've won over 63% of their games over the last 8 seasons. Jacksonville State is located in Jacksonville, Alabama. The closest top 200 airport is Birmingham, 70 miles away. Their business school is ranked within the nation's 90th percentile, and in 2018, an EF3 tornado swept through campus, inflicting $42 million in damages. Gamecock football has a $4.8 million football budget, which will go up moving to FBS. Jacksonville State completed a $47 million stadium renovation in 2010, and they've just approved an $80 million renovation to be completed for 2023 when they begin Conference USA play. JSU's 17,000 3-year average attendance would rank 2nd in Conference USA despite playing in FCS. JSU's attendance would be top 5 for non-HBCU FCS schools for the 5 consecutive years pre-COVID. Jacksonville State has qualified for 6 of the last 8 FCS playoffs, and by moving to FBS, there's a chance that the Gamecocks could renew the battle for the old school bell with Troy, who is a member of the Sun Belt, as those two schools met all but 4 years from 1946 through 2001. Jacksonville State basketball has a $1.5 million men's basketball budget. Their stadium was renovated in 2015. Their 5-year Ken Pom of 171 would rank 5th in Conference USA. They went to the NCAA tournament in 2017, and they've won over 60% of their games over the past 5 seasons. Another crisis was averted in Conference USA as Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee nearly joined the MAC. Western Kentucky intended to join the MAC, but the invite was contingent on Middle Tennessee accepting. The Western Kentucky athletic director was quoted, "I know there's uncertainty among our fans with how much Conference USA has changed, and I know a lot of them became increasingly excited about the opportunity to join the MAC, as were we, but this is just one chapter. It's not the final chapter." He goes on to say, "If we had been invited to join the MAC, we would have said yes. If we're invited to join the MAC down the line, then I think the answer to that would probably be yes, because if it makes sense today, then I think it's safe to assume it would make sense down the line." On the other side of the 100 miles of hate, Middle Tennessee turned down the MAC, inadvertently spoiling Western Kentucky's MAC bid. The Middle Tennessee president was quoted, "With the addition of 4 new members, Conference USA offers a strong footprint in the South and Southwest, providing opportunities to develop new regional rivalries while staying connected to traditional opponents that our fans want." The Middle Tennessee athletic director added, "Our fans, they point more to the South. There is a consensus of that from our fan base." In a poll asking did Middle Tennessee make the correct decision staying in Conference USA, 172 of you voted, and 56% of you voted no, it was not the correct decision. Middle Tennessee should have moved to the MAC, while 44% of you voted yes, staying in Conference USA was the correct decision. It was a matter of long-term stability versus what was best financially in the short term, as moving to the MAC would have been costly for Middle Tennessee. First, when you factor in the 9 departing schools paying a $3 million exit fee, that's $27 million, then divide it by the 5 remaining members, and that's $5.4 million per school. Then factor in the entrance fees of the 4 schools entering Conference USA, which is $2 million. That $8 million is divided by the 5 remaining schools for $1.6 million per school. That brings you up to $7 million, and Middle Tennessee would have to pay a Conference USA exit fee of $3 million, which brings you up to $10 million. And the MAC entrance fee, I'm not 100% sure on, but I read that it's $1 million. So moving to the MAC would have cost Middle Tennessee a ballpark of about $11 million. Now the question is, can Middle Tennessee make up that $11 million over the long term? Looking up the TV revenue in both leagues, and I tend not to go off the reported TV revenue because it doesn't account for the production costs that ESPN basically forces the schools to pay off themselves. So instead, looking at each league's IRS Form 990, the MAC reported their TV revenue at a tad over $9 million, which would come out to $765,000 per school. Conference USA reported their TV revenue at about $6.5 million, which came out to about $460,000 per school with 14 members. Now, Conference USA's membership has changed, and they're going to come up for a new TV deal soon. But I'm assuming the per school payout will probably still end up being around $460,000. So if you go off the conference's IRS forms, Middle Tennessee would be making about $300,000 more in TV revenue per year in the MAC than Conference USA. Now, there's other revenue streams, but take NCAA tournament distributions, for example. The MAC would be splitting it 14 ways if Middle Tennessee were to join, whereas if Middle Tennessee remains in Conference USA would be splitting it anywhere from 9 to 12 ways. And considering Conference USA is going to have some really good basketball schools at the top, like New Mexico State, Liberty, Middle Tennessee has won a couple games recently, Western Kentucky has quite a few wins in their history. Conference USA and the MAC will likely be pretty close to each other in the NCAA tournament credits they earn in the future. These are the institutional profiles of new Conference USA. Liberty has a monster $1.7 billion endowment. FIU and Liberty have the largest undergraduate full-time enrollment at 28,000 apiece. Everyone else is in the 6,000 to 16,000 range for undergraduate full-time enrollment. Here is the airport accessibility for non-revenue sports. I arbitrarily cut it off at the top 200 busiest airports. So of course, in reality, it could be different. For example, schools flying to Louisiana Tech might just fly to Monroe Regional Airport instead of Shreveport. but this is probably generally accurate. These are the athletic budgets for the schools according to the Department of Education, Equity, and Athletics. Sam Houston State and Jacksonville State will go up, moving to FBS. Liberty has the largest athletic budget at nearly $48 million, followed by FIU and Middle Tennessee. These are the football budgets per the Department of Education, Equity, and Athletics. Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State will go up, moving to FBS. Liberty has the highest football budget, followed by FIU, and there's a lot of budget parity for football otherwise. And here are the men's basketball budgets. The top five are all bunched together: Liberty, UTEP, New Mexico State, Middle Tennessee, and Western Kentucky, separated by $100,000 increments. Looking at the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics, here is where the revenues come from. This is outdated a bit. USA Today database is more up to date, but they just put their whole database behind a paywall. So this divides everything by school funds, student fees, and then everything else is non-allocated. And the graph is sorted from the highest non-allocated revenue to the least non-allocated revenue in orange, while the dark blue is school funds and the light blue is student fees. Louisiana Tech has the highest non-allocated revenue. And continuing with the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics database, here's what I call self-generated revenue, divided between ticket sales, donor contributions, and sponsorship/licensing, which all added together make up self-generated revenue. The graph has ticket sales in orange, donor contributions in dark blue, and sponsorships and licensing in light blue. Louisiana Tech has the highest self-generated revenue on the back of a very high donor contributions. This graph shows the 3-year rolling attendance average in football pre-COVID. Louisiana Tech was in first. Jacksonville State was in second, which is pretty impressive considering they were in FCS. Liberty was third, but I'm sure it's going to be higher now, given how good the team has gotten. And UTEP and New Mexico State were doing pretty well considering how bad their football teams usually are. UTEP used to average well over 30,000 back in the day. For the 3-year rolling men's basketball attendance average pre-COVID, New Mexico State is in first, followed by Western Kentucky and UTEP, then Middle Tennessee. New Mexico State and Western Kentucky have long been known for their home court advantages. Here's the 5-year Sagarin average. For Liberty, I removed their one FCS season. Otherwise, for everyone, it's from 2017 up until this week in 2021. And obviously for Sam Houston State and Jacksonville State, these are all FCS seasons for them. So Jacksonville State has done really well for an FCS school to be 141 in Sagarin, and Sam Houston State has done excellent, ranking above quite a few FBS schools. Here's the 5-year KenPom in men's basketball. No surprise that New Mexico State leads the way. Louisiana Tech and Western Kentucky and Liberty all being up high is to be expected. Middle Tennessee recently took down a national title contender in the NCAA tournament and demolished another Big Ten team, but the past 3 years have really skewed their 5-year KenPom average. This chart shows the conference net ranking for old Conference USA and what the conference net ranking would be for new Conference USA just by taking the average net of all the schools. Of course, the calculation is much more complicated than that, but that's the best we can do. So with a simple swap, new Conference USA would be projected the number 10 conference in 2019, number 13 in 2020, and number 12 in 2021. Here's a list of the P5 schools that will be playing in Conference USA standings once new Conference USA is underway in 2023 through 2030. Louisiana Tech has a trio of P5 schools coming to Ruston. Middle Tennessee hosts Duke again. Western Kentucky has Cincinnati coming to Bowling Green. And Liberty hosts an ACC school for 6 consecutive years from 2025 through 2030. And here are the NCAA tournament appearances. New Mexico State, very historic college basketball program, has 25 appearances with 1 Final Four and 5 Sweet 16s. Western Kentucky has 23 NCAA tournament appearances with 8 Sweet 16s and 1 Final Four. UTEP, another historic college basketball program like New Mexico State and Western Kentucky, the Miners have 17 NCAA tournament appearances. They won the 1966 national championship as Texas Western, and they've been to 4 Sweet 16s. Middle Tennessee has 9 bids of their own. They've won in the NCAA tournament 4 times. Louisiana Tech has 5 bids. They've been to a Sweet 16 and have won in the NCAA tournament 3 different times. Liberty has 5 bids, and they won in the NCAA tournament in 2019. Sam Houston has made a couple trips, and Jacksonville State and FIU have 1 trip apiece. Finally, here's a one-sheeter putting all of that together. The first column is ticket sales, the second column is donor contributions, the third column is sponsorships and licensing, and those three columns add up to the fourth column, which is self-generated revenue. The fifth column is non-allocated revenue. The sixth column is school funds, followed by student fees, then their athletic budget, then football budget, then men's basketball budget, followed by endowment and their undergraduate full-time enrollment. The airport listed is the closest top 200 busiest airport. The miles is their distance from that airport. Then their 3-year rolling football attendance average pre-COVID, same thing with men's basketball, followed by their 5-year Sagarin rating in football, then their 5-year KenPom rating in men's basketball, and last, their number of NCAA tournament appearances.